Hi, and welcome to the Captioned Life, a show for the most casual and dedicated fans of comics and a member of the Comic Watch family. I'm your host, Sean. Join me and discover what the world of comics and graphic novels have to offer. From one-on-one interviews with industry professionals, roundtable discussions with passionate fans, and reviews on the latest comics, TV shows, and movies. Now let's dive right on in. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. In today's episode, we are discussing the Marvel Studios Disney Plus series She-Hulk Attorney at Law. I know many of you have probably watched this, but for those of you that haven't yet, or if you just want to know the details in general, here's the official synopsis and production details. The synopsis reads, in Marvel Studios She-Hulk Attorney at Law, Jennifer Walters, an attorney specializing in superhuman-oriented legal cases, must navigate the complicated life of a single 30-something who also happens to be a green 6'7" super-powered Hulk. The show was created and written by Jessica Gao. Episodes were directed by Kate Coro and Anu Valia. And the cast include Tatiana Maslany as Jennifer Walters / She-Hulk, Ginger Gonzaga as Nikki Ramos, Malia Araya, which I hope I pronounced that correctly, I don't know, as Onset She-Hulk reference, Jamila Jamil as Titania, and Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner / Hulk. But before we get started with our review, we do have an awesome guest with us that will be adding their thoughts and insight about She-Hulk. Please welcome to the show Maggie, who goes by VeganSuperKick. Maggie is new to comic books, but no stranger to fandoms, a co-owner of a toy store, and a huge fan of wrestling. She quickly jumped into the comic culture and loves discussing representation and themes within the genre. Maggie, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
Not too bad. It's been kind of crazy. We were talking about this a little bit. I was actually just gone last week on vacation, and I felt like it was a pretty good time to take a break from everything that's happening. So I'm glad to come back and talk about She-Hulk because it wrapped up, I think, about a week and a half ago from the night that we're recording here. So it seems like we're a little bit late on that, but that's just because I wasn't able to get it in last weekend. So, but yeah, other than that, doing pretty good. So
good. I'm glad. Yeah. Well, and it gave us some time to kind of really get our thoughts together. You know
yes.
What I mean? Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's kind of good to have a little bit of time to think through things or even rewatch some things before you start discussing it as well too. So
yeah.
So in your bio real quick, I want to share that you had said that you're a co-owner of a toy store. And I want to ask you, how did that come about? Because I remember, first of all, you and I are mutuals from TikTok. That's how we both connected. And I love your content, especially we're both huge fans of Daredevil as well too. So it's like anytime that you're talking about Daredevil, I'm watching it because I'm like, yes, more of this, please.
Yeah.
But being a co-owner of a toy store, I'm kind of curious, how did that come to be? Is that something that you've always planned for? Is that something that's kind of fell in your lap, or is it an opportunity or anything like that? Can you share a little bit about that experience?
It is definitely something I never planned on. If you had told me 10 years ago that this would be my life, I would be like, what are you talking about? That's insane.
Right.
But it's actually my husband's baby, and he's always kind of been infatuated with comics and figures and things like that. And it was something he was kind of doing on the fly anonymously when we met, and after we got married we were like, hey, let's just do this. And I did hair for 11 years, and in the middle of the pandemic I had to kind of step back from that to do virtual learning with our son, and now I am pretty involved with the store. And that's kind of how I got in the position where I'm at. I would spend so much time just picking up Marvel Legends and stuff and be like, who's this? He looks creepy. Or who's this? She looks awesome. And he's like, well, okay, this is that character, and if you like them, you should watch this movie. And he showed me all the MCU movies in order, and now I read comics every week, so I have him to thank for all of this. But yeah, I guess you could say I got into all of it kind of backwards too,
right.
Figures, movies, and then comics. But
right, yeah,
it's a fun life.
And I love the name of the store, but just because it throws me off. But would you like to share the name of the store?
Yeah, we're called Toy Vomit.
Is there a story behind that name for all of us that are listening?
I think that, so he came up with it, but it was just kind of this anonymous Instagram handle that he had for a long time. And I mean, you don't forget a name like Toy Vomit. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Right.
Yeah.
And your bio said that you're relatively new to reading comics. And from what you just shared, it sounds like you probably started around when the pandemic started. Is that right? Or were you reading it
Yeah,
before? Okay.
around then is when I got really into specifically like MCU projects, just because there's so much of it available.
Right.
And we had Disney Plus then, but I really just kind of got into everything around then. And yeah, I after I got more familiar with characters and stories, I would start asking more questions like, okay, well, what should I read to figure this out or like whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
here I am. So
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and I
yeah.
gotta say that knowing that detail, because I didn't know that until just now. Watching your TikTok videos, you're very knowledgeable of a lot of the comics that you talk about. So
Thank
I'm just
you.
very impressed because me, I grew up reading comics and then I got back into it about 5 or 6 years ago when I got Marvel Unlimited. And me personally, I've just been kind of a slow reader. So I kind of grew up with the comics world, but don't have the same kind of knowledge with like some of the details or things like that. So I'm kind of getting caught back up with what I missed out from, the 20 years that I've been, missing out on comics and everything. But I've always been very intrigued and impressed with all the knowledge that you have, and even more impressed that this is a relatively new journey for you. So this is
Thank
really cool.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. That's really nice. I think it's called a hyperfixation, but we'll call it, knowledge and wisdom. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I am fortunate enough to have time to dedicate to reading comics and make content about it. So
Mhm.
I'm very lucky for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, and one of the reasons why I brought you on the show is because you had said that you're a very big fan of She-Hulk in the comics. And so I thought you would have a lot to say about the show as well, too. And so I'm really excited to have you on to review the She-Hulk show. So
Thank
I'm
you.
very excited about that.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, with that said, just like all of our review episodes, there's going to be spoilers. So, for those who are listening and haven't finished watching She-Hulk yet, I would recommend that you press pause now, go watch it, and then come back. So, now let's go ahead and jump right into our review. So, for this episode, we are going to discuss some of the key moments, themes, and elements of She-Hulk. And so, what we're going to be discussing is our overall thoughts. We're going to talk about how the show kept true to the character from the comics, how this is a show focused on women's experience, because I think that was a big part of the theme that you and I, Maggie, identified with the show, and how people reacted to that. We're going to talk about all the characters that this series had, like Hulk and Abomination, the B-level character villains that were in here, Daredevil, obviously, because we talked about how we're both fans of that character in general. We're going to talk about the finale episode and what this means for the future of the MCU. So, with that being said, and that being our outline, let's go ahead and start with overall thoughts, and I'll kick this over to you, Maggie. What was your overall thoughts about this show, She-Hulk Attorney at Law?
If I had to like rate it on like a 10 scale, I'd probably I'm gonna give it a high number. I give it like an 8 or a 9. Honestly, like I thought it was fantastic. I love that it was so much like it was so different from all the other shows.
Right.
But it still was like as exciting to me as any other Marvel project. I loved it. I absolutely loved it for sure. Did you like it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And this is something that I've been discussing in anytime I have conversations about the MCU, because I know there's been a lot of complaints generally from people about how the MCU feels like it kind of follows the same formula, at least for the movies, in terms of how it develops and what it's about and things like that. And She-Hulk, I think, is one of many projects that are doing something different that we haven't seen before that doesn't fit that formula. And this was a great show to do that because of the character and because of, that background of what the character is like in the comics. They had a lot of fun with this. I think, there's a lot of elements to this show that made it very successful from a humor standpoint and from, just character development as well as content and things like that. I love just some of the things that they really took advantage. I think the show itself here really played into and leaned into the trolls that they've kind of had to battle throughout the whole time they've announced the She-Hulk and series and everything else that, people have been hearing about the MCU. But they, just had a lot of fun with being able to write this show, and it came through. And I think overall, I would give it about maybe more like around 7 or 8, just because there's a couple episodes I felt like this show was episodic in the sense that every episode seemed like it was a self-contained story. But there was a couple episodes for me where if you took it out, it didn't really do much of anything for the entire season overall. So that's why I kind of gave it around a 7, just because I felt like there was a couple of episodes that probably could have developed a little bit more, and didn't seem like it really hang with a lot of the other things that are going on. And just the fact that there wasn't, I think there wasn't a clear, storyline from beginning to end, or at least not a strong storyline from beginning to end, because it was very episodic in nature as well too. But with that being said, I did love what was all in there. I loved the characters that they had in there. I loved all the things that they did with it, and everything else that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this episode as well too. But I really enjoyed it. I think that this was a really fun one where it's meant to be lighthearted and silly and fun, and not something that we've seen in the other projects of the MCU as well. So
big time. Yeah, big time. Agree for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about how the show kept true to the character and the comics for Jennifer Walters and She-Hulk. And I'm going to be honest and say that I've only read a couple of She-Hulk issues, so I'm not extremely familiar from the original source material of She-Hulk. I've read up about her, in summaries and things like that, but I haven't really, dove into the comics probably as much as you have. And so I wanted to ask you, how did you think this show did in terms of translating the character from the comics into a series for Disney Plus?
I think they did a fantastic job, honestly, and that's not being biased because I love the show or the character that much. But to me, one of the most interesting things about She-Hulk is she was the first Marvel character to break the fourth wall. And her being the first character in the MCU to do, obviously we can't have anybody else do it, but staying that true to the comics, and I think they did a good job. There were some, I think, in the early episodes where she would say something, I'm like, that was a little cheesy. But at the end of the day, like that is Jennifer Walters. You know what I mean? She's a little, I don't know how to describe her. She's a little cheesy. She's a little quirky. But yeah, no, between that and just like her attitude towards life and men and the people around her, like in this most recent run that's being put out by, I think, Rainbow Roll, she's terrified of Mallory. And so like it all just, it's very consistent with multiple runs that I've been reading. So I think they did a great job. I'm excited to see how they handle her moving forward too.
Right.
Yeah.
I gotta say, there's a lot of great fourth wall breaks that they've had in the show. My favorite one was, I think in episode 3, when she looks at the camera and says, connecting plot A with plot B. Nice. Totally unexpected, because she was off camera to begin with, and just for her to pop in and then pop out like that was probably my favorite fourth wall break moment in the series as a whole. So I love that. What'd you think about Tatiana Maslany playing the character? You think she did a good job portraying her as an actress?
She really did. She really did. At first, I'll be totally honest with you, I've never seen any of like the other stuff she's been in. I know she was in what was the one where she played like a bunch of different characters? Orphan Black, was that it?
Maybe, yeah. I think that's where people, yeah.
But so at first I was like, well, she's kind of like tiny and like small. I don't think she's gonna be that scary, you know what I mean? But then like you just love her. Like she just makes you just fall in love with her as a character. And I think that kind of makes her a little bit more relatable in this day and age. So yeah, I think she did a fantastic job. She made me want to be like best friends with Jennifer Walters,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I agree with you. That the first time I saw her was she was actually a somewhat regular in the show Parks and Rec, which I don't know if you've ever watched that show.
Was she?
Yes. So she was the traveling doctor that ended up dating Tom Haverford for a while.
Oh my God, she was.
Yes.
It's been a long time since I've watched Parks and Rec. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have seen her in other stuff. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
and the first episode of my watch, I was like, she just looks so familiar. And so I had to look up IMDb when I
Yeah.
saw Parks and Rec. Like, I don't think I even had to look at the character's name. I was like, oh yes, that's why
Yeah.
I've seen her at,
Yeah.
and she was great in that. But yeah, with her being Jennifer Walters, like you said, she is as in her human form, smaller than a lot of the other supporting characters and everything, but her personality that she brought with the character was just bigger than
Yes.
life, that
That
really just made her shine throughout the whole series. And
that made up for it for sure. Yeah, because I
definitely
feel like, at least in the comics I've read, even Jennifer Walters in her human form is kind of like a and maybe she's not, like, maybe I just read her that way because she's a lawyer, you know what I mean? Like, lawyers
right.
are scary to me, but like she does kind of usually look like a 5'7" woman, you know what I mean? Wearing heels.
Hmm.
Like, she looks huge and like scary anyway. But yeah, no, I, like you said, the personality that she brought to the show was just, it was fantastic.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and she had a great mix of delivering the comedic lines with some of the more dramatic and emotional scenes that we saw, especially,
Yeah.
looking at the themes of comparing Jennifer Walters with She-Hulk, how they're, two sides of the same coin and everything. And how, that's a metaphor for a lot of things that we can talk about as well too. But the
Mhm.
fact that she was able to kind of bring that all together and deliver it in such a, powerful way each and every time, no matter if it was something that she was supposed to deliver a punchline, or something that was supposed to be like gut wrenching, or just, you know, anger, like what we saw in the first episode and all that. She just did a fantastic job, I think, of bringing that, strong balance to all those things that she delivered as well.
Yeah,
So,
she
yeah.
crushed it. And you can tell, like, no matter what, like, you can tell that she just genuinely enjoys being that character too. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can just see it in interviews and stuff like that. Like, she really is happy to be here. And like, it just makes me happy to have her, you know?
Yeah. Well,
So,
and what I love about what the marketing team has done with She-Hulk is how they leaned into Madison and Titania on social
yeah.
media with having
Yeah.
Jamil. I always tripped up her name, so I probably, butchered that really bad. But how she went and like spray painted a wall. Then there was like that TikTok video where Madison's like standing in front of her, then Titania was like walking behind her,
Yes.
very sinister and all that. Like, I think they did a great job of just really playing into that and having a lot of fun with that as well too.
No, I agree. I think Titania just like taking over Jamil's entire social media was
Yeah.
just perfect. It was
Yeah.
really, really perfect because it's like so true to that character anyway. It was great.
Right.
I liked how they wrote her for the show.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because I know there's been some discussions about her character story in the
Hmm.
show and how they've handled that as well too. But one of the themes that we wanted to talk about, and there's a lot of things that we can touch base on, but I think overall from beginning to end, what we really saw in this show was that this is really focused on women's experience. So right off the bat, this is a show that men can enjoy, but it's definitely relates to women on a larger scale that we haven't seen in some of the other shows that we've have from the MCU as well too. So even though we've had some powerful female lead, this seemed like it was really geared towards the everyday woman's experience. And it's funny is when I watched this with my wife, I never said anything during this episode, but she's, when a moment comes up, like for example, when Jennifer Walters shows up in the women's bathroom and all that, she's like, see, she's like, she was telling me there's this like unspoken rule, like when that happens, like you take care of your own and everything,
Yes.
and that honestly, like that's something I really never knew, being a male, just like how there's that kind of experience and culture that exists. And, like my wife and I've been married for years and we never really talked about that, but it was really interesting how she had brought that up to me. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that this was a thing that, even she knew. Like, I didn't know if like it was something like, for like a particular group of women, but I mean, she was just like, yeah, this is a thing. And so
No,
I thought it
yeah.
was really interesting. So I want to get your perspective on, how you felt about the theme of this being, um, diving into a lived experience for women as a theme for the show, and what your takeaway was from that and what you thought about that.
I as a woman, I absolutely loved it. And like there were definitely scenes where I like emotionally reacted, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Because like your wife, like there is a culture there, like there is this kind of silent understanding. Like we've all helped girls walk to their car in the dark. Like we've all had to like call out someone's boyfriend in public who was like screaming at a girl that we didn't even know. You know what I mean? Like it's happened to everybody. It's probably happened to us, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, the theme of the shared female experience, I think they did a really great job of doing that without like really driving it home. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And I'm sure some people think that they did, but I think that they did an awesome job of being like, this is camaraderie, and this is some things that women have to go through, like that whole conversation that she had with Bruce, and like what was that, the first episode, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and that's, you know, people got in a big tizzy over that, but there was nothing but facts being spoken there, you know, like
Right.
yeah, I loved it, and as a woman, I related to it, and like you said, we haven't really had that in the MCU before. I feel like most of, and there's some Phase 4 projects that are a little bit of an exception there, but like up until now, you know, like the story of Black Widow is pretty alienating.
Right.
The story of even Wanda is like it's still relatable. These are all relatable stories, but like there's just nothing. There's no camaraderie. There's no group setting for
Mm-hmm.
them to fall back on as characters. They all had to go through things alone.
Right.
So to see, you know, Nikki and all her friends like kind of come together for her, like, and even strangers in a bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
it felt more real and relatable to me. Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, for me, honestly, the only other time we've kind of experienced that sort of female camaraderie was in Hawkeye between Kate and Elena.
That's what I was gonna say. I think
Yeah.
Hawkeye's kind of the only exception to that from
Yeah. But even
yeah,
then, that was secondary versus how this show really, that was one of the central themes with it as well
yeah,
too. So, but
yeah.
yeah, just as you mentioned, I think there's a few moments in the series that really stood out to me that really focused on women's experience, was just like what you had said when she was talking to Bruce about how she had to control her anger. Excuse me, sorry. How Jennifer had to control her anger multiple times, because she's a woman, because of how she'll be perceived if she, lost her anger, or, this or that. And again, I think it was really telling about how there was a lot of, toxic fans that came out and said, that negated Bruce's experience, which in my opinion did not do that at all. Like
No.
Bruce definitely had trauma, but she was not downplaying the trauma. She just talked about how she has had experience like dealing with that anger, because up to that point, Bruce never had experience having to control his anger until it became the Hulk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
Yeah.
Jennifer was just simply sharing that she's had to learn to do that as a woman before she became She-Hulk, because that was a lived experience. And so I think that was something that, was really interesting, how that was the very first thing that people were talking about in that episode of, why they thought that was a terrible thing to do and everything. And so that was, really interesting. And then the one thing that really surprised me in terms of what got, some toxic fans really in a tizzy, was the whole twerking scene in episode 3 with Megan
Yeah.
Thee Stallion. I thought it was a lot of fun. Like when I watched that, like I would not have predicted that this was something that people would lose their minds over. And so I was really
Yeah.
surprised that was a problem for some people, like, were you surprised by that too? Or you're just like,
I really was because uh, because there's some hypocrisy there. I mean, if Deadpool did it, it would be funny.
right.
And I would laugh. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
not saying I wouldn't think it was funny just for, sake of the conversation, but
Hmm.
if Deadpool did it, it would be funny. That's all I'm going to say about that. But
Hmm.
no, I agree. That one for sure took me by surprise. But I think by the time that moment had happened, people were already upset and offended and just looking for other reasons to be mad. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think that,
Yeah.
whatever.
Like, and that's the thing, is like no matter what would have happened,
Yeah.
they would have had something to complain
Yeah.
about, or been upset about and all that. And that was something that was just like it. I thought that of the whole episode, that would have been the safest thing, because it was just a funny, goofy scene. And
Yeah.
apparently Yeah, just like we said, just people had a problem with that because they're just looking for that. The other thing that I thought was really interesting and really powerful in this series was the focus on, real versus personified identity, I guess. And I don't want to say personified necessarily, but the dealing with the identities on depending on the situation that you're in, right? So I forget which episode this was, but this is when Jennifer decided to go do the online dating, and she wasn't having a lot of success as Jennifer, so she went as She-Hulk, and she had a lot of success in terms of matches and everything, but she was still ending up with some creepy people, and then she did end up connecting with somebody that she liked, but then when she became Jennifer, he immediately did not have any interest in her whatsoever. And you saw how that was just kind of a blow to her, because even though she is She-Hulk, she still identifies as Jennifer Walters. I feel like, that's kind of the real identity that people have versus the one that they, kind of make online, or, the perceived identity that they put out there as well too. And I thought that was really interesting because we haven't really seen that played out in a series or in a movie in the MCU yet. And again, I think this is really cool because this is a different kind of series that we can dive into, that it's not following the formulaic type of thing that people are complaining about, but it does give you a lot of, connection and insight on what that experience is like, especially, for men who haven't been on that side of the coin, or, people who haven't done the online dating, or, dating in the 30s, and what that experience is like as well too. And so I thought that was a really cool way to kind of express that sort of experience in the TV show.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that also kind of calls back to some moments that she has in the comics too, where it's like, she does struggle, and eventually she becomes very comfortable just being She-Hulk, obviously. But yeah, like just being accepted as yourself, like you said, I really didn't even think about that, like how you present yourself to the world versus how you are in real life. And yeah, I felt for her on that one for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about one of the things that this show has done that we haven't seen in the MCU yet, which we've already talked about in a number of things, but this show gave us a lot of characters in a small amount of time in a lot of different ways, right? So we got some of the heavy hitters like Hulk and Abomination. We got Daredevil, which we're going to, save that for, a different point in this conversation, because I think you and I really want to dive into that really well. But Hulk and Abomination is in there, but we also got a lot of B-level characters like Titania, LeapFrog, Mamble, the Magician, Donnie Blaze, the Wrecking Crew, Porcupine, Mr. Immortal. And so this show gave us, one episode, or each episode gave us just a fun side character that we got in the comics that probably wouldn't have shown up in a solo project or anything else, but it made a lot of sense to kind of do it in She-Hulk, because then you had a lot of fun with it, and that you could bring in these levels of characters without feeling like you had to make them, serious. Like if you had some of these characters in a movie or something like that, that wasn't, comedic in nature necessarily, but it was more of a dramatic or action-packed form. These characters probably wouldn't show up, but it made a lot of sense in She-Hulk. So I wanted to ask you what you thought about that. If there were any characters that we got from the show that really stood out from you, that were B-level characters, or just, any other character that we may have seen or not seen before.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought it was really funny, and like I thought it was a great way to kind of just bring in some random characters, from the comics, like you said, people that would literally never get any like spotlight in media after that. But I think it's a good representation of like the kind of clients that she gets as a lawyer, as like a superhero lawyer, you know what I mean? Because B-level people are out here doing some B-level stuff. So so it is like a cute little nod to like her work as a lawyer, I think. But I really enjoyed that one particular episode that she spent the entire day at like Abomination's lodge or whatever.
Yeah.
And like when we got to meet all those people, we laughed at is it Porcupine? We laughed at Porcupine. Yes. We thought him taking off the mask and be like, no, put it back on.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was really funny. That was really cute. Yeah, he might have been my favorite.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think for me, I really liked them. I think LeapFrog was just funny because
Yeah.
he saw himself as kind of a hero, but end up being a villain like really quickly. So it's just funny how, and especially given his status, because you find out that his father is like really important for the law firm. So he became important for that, and that he immediately flipped like in
Yeah.
the same episode in terms of I was being a good guy, and now that something didn't go my way, I'm going to be the bad guy.
Yep.
One of the things one of the characters I found that was really interesting, that I did want to talk about was Titania. And that is because Titania as a character in a background was very, very minimal, right? So
Mhm.
what we learned about her is that she was a superhero social media influencer. Again, I didn't read her in the comics, so I don't know how that translated from the comics to the show necessarily, but that's pretty much the only backstory that we got, other than that, and we just know that she didn't like She-Hulk for a number of reasons, right? And we still don't know why Titania smashed through the courtroom in the first episode.
Right. Yeah.
So there's like, so I get when people are saying like, there's just a lot of holes in the story.
Mhm.
I agree with them with that. And that, I think that can bother you if you're just like, I want to know why she was doing that or why this was happening and everything.
Mhm.
On the flip side, this is not something that's uncommon in the MCU either. Like, for example, one of my favorite characters, Hawkeye, when we first got him in Thor, we didn't get any backstory other than he was a agent of Shield, basically, and that whole
Yeah.
movie, it seemed like nobody was really bothered by that. No one was like asking who was Clint Barton. We was just like, we all know he's Hawkeye. We just kind of moved on from that and everything.
Yeah.
And so I find it interesting that yes, those are some elements that probably could have been filled in, but at the same time, it's not a unique thing in the MCU to introduce a character and not give you all that. And so I think it's something to always ask ourselves, did we get enough though to know what's happening with the larger story and all that?
Mhm.
And I think by Titania, there's some things that we probably could have got more. Maybe it was just left on the cutting room floor. But I think overall, I'm just kind of curious because you had mentioned that how Titania is in the comics. What did you think about her story and how they treated her in the show, from the comics as well?
So I haven't read much of her in the comics. I'm
Okay.
familiar with like when she was in like the Mighty Thor run.
Hmm.
And I'm from she's been in and out of like this very current She-Hulk run. So I know very little about her. I've never seen her be portrayed as like a social media influencer, but I will say I think that that was such a good way. Like this show does such a good job of like connecting with the current audience,
Right.
that I think that that was kind of the perfect way to introduce her as a character because she is like big and loud and larger than life in the comics.
Hmm.
But other than that, from again from what I know, somebody might email me and be like, "Here, right here, she was on Instagram or whatever." But I don't know.
Right.
But my thought process is this, and I've seen this is not my original thought. I took this from Twitter and I was like, "That's a really good idea." But when you look at Titania and you look at like Mallory, two
Mhm.
people that Jennifer's always kind of at odds with, those two people in my head are representing each side of her life if
Mhm.
she fully committed to either one. You know
Right.
what I mean? If she really committed to law, she could be just like Mallory. If she really committed to just being a superhero, she could be as big and scary as Titania.
Mhm.
And I also think too that, and I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this, let me know. But I also think that like the whole trademarking of the She-Hulk thing and like her taking it and turning it into her own thing, to me that was kind of a little bit of a nod to like the controversy around why She-Hulk was even created, right?
Oh,
Like
okay. Yeah.
yeah, like just being created so they could just get a copyright on the character before anybody else could.
Right.
So I feel like that little bit of controversy was kind of like a callback to her origins as a character.
Mhm.
So I liked it. And Titania is always kind of somebody that she rivals with in the comics. Like in the current run by Rainbow Roll, she and Titania have a fight club together where they just get together and they
Oh,
just
that's
beat the
awesome.
crap out of each other. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love it. I love it so much. So as different as she is from what I've read, um, I thought the way that they wrote it was fantastic.
Mhm.
And I agree with you. I feel like even though I didn't know a whole lot about it, I feel like I don't really need to know that much. You
Right.
know, like
Right.
like that's just it. So
because again, it's a Jennifer Walters show. It's not a cameo
exactly,
show or Titania.
exactly. But
Now,
I do think. Go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
So in Titania and I can't remember her sister's name, they get their powers in the comics from Doctor Doom. So I was
Oh, okay.
kind of hoping maybe we would get some kind of like little hint and a nod of like,
Yeah.
not necessarily like an origin story on her, but like maybe a little bit of why she's a superhero. That would have been a nice little hint, but
Yeah.
maybe her being around was enough. So
Yeah. Well, I feel like Doctor Doom is kind of like the Kevin Bacon of MCU because it's almost like every project they come in, everyone's like, this is why Doctor Doom can show up. Like for Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, there's a lot of rationale as to why Doctor Doom can show up because there's a lot of back history between him and Wakanda, you know? So I find it very interesting that every project we have coming up, it's like Doctor Doom can show up in this one.
Yeah, I know. It's I try not to buy into that stuff, but then at like 1 a.m, I'm like,
yeah,
maybe.
It's a lot of fun to indulge in that as well too. Is like, just kind of thinking, so because you probably saw this, but I had a theory of with SheHulk and Daredevil, which I'm a little bit disappointed that they didn't do this because I think this would have been the ultimate thing that they could have done with the show. But I had made a TikTok video saying like, wouldn't it be funny how all the toxic fans who were really disappointed with Daredevil and they were only watching it for Daredevil, they finally get him in the last or second to last episode, and then we find out that it was a scroll, and not just that, but a female scroll, so another green female that ended up being their favorite character this whole time. And so it would have been the ultimate troll for them, right? So I would have loved that. But I want to get back to what you had mentioned, because I think some of us aren't familiar with the copyright issues with She-Hulk that you brought up. And so I want to ask you, because I'm a little bit familiar with it, but I feel like you're more familiar with the circumstances around and everything. But can you share and explain what was that copyright issue with She-Hulk in the comics and why they made her, and kind of explain that backstory there?
So I am pretty sure I made a couple TikTok videos about this before the show even aired. So like I might not get it entirely correct, but the success of, I think it was the Bionic Man. I can't remember.
I think that. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there was that, and then like the Incredible Hulk like show or whatever became so popular that they were really afraid. Like Marvel was afraid that the success of the Bionic Man, they were going to make like a Bionic Woman or something like that. I can't remember. I should have watched my old TikTok videos before. I knew I was going to have to say something about this, but essentially, She-Hulk was created like out of a rat race to get a copyright for a big scary mommy character. You know what I mean? And I think her origin story is kind of cool, like in the comics. But yeah, essentially, that's kind of the argument between some people who just don't really care for her as a character, is that she was just created out of necessity. You know what I mean? Just to kind of have the character around. But she's got her own origin story. She was created like 17 years after Bruce, and has had many successful like solo comic runs since then. So I don't really see what the argument is.
Right. But that kind of makes sense, and now kind of put that in perspective with this whole case with Titania and the She-Hulk name. That actually I never put the two and two together, so I love making that connection that you just made with that. So that's really cool. So thank you for explaining that backstory.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to say about Titania, then we'll move on to one of our favorite characters in the show here, is that I feel like Titania was also kind of a nod to The Boys, the TV show from Amazon Prime, The Boys, that's based on the comic of the same name. That the whole story of The Boys is pretty much like what would happen if superheroes were, capitalized basically in the free market, and that's essentially what Titania is for the MCU. Is this is a superhero that is really utilizing and using the free markets and capitalism to her advantage and everything. And so I think it was kind of like a fun little nod to that whole success of The Boys, and kind of bringing that whole idea into what if superheroes were, kind of, heroes for hire, which that'd be great if we got
no, I
series,
think you're right. She's pretty much like the first super powered person we've seen really, like you said, capitalize on it. I off the top of my head can't really think of anybody. Usually everybody else is like struggling,
Right.
and like
Or
and Jen's kind of going that way too, but not really capitalizing on it, but like she's cool with it.
right. Exactly.
So
Yeah. And the only person or few people that you could probably say might have been Tony Stark, but he was doing that way
yeah,
before he got his, super armor and tech and all that.
yeah,
And he's kind of
yeah,
doing it differently than what Titania is doing here. So because Tony is more, his name was already recognized as a giant in the tech industry before he
yeah,
became Iron Man, whereas Titania is really leaning into her presence as a superhero, social media influencer
exactly,
to do
exactly.
those things. So,
Yeah.
all right, so let's talk about the character that we have been really waiting for in this show, other than Jennifer Walters, and that is Daredevil. And I'm going to let you go first. And just what do you want to talk about and say about Daredevil in this series?
Oh, I thought it was great. I thought
Right?
it was. I have no notes on how well it was perfect. I
Yeah.
I loved how it was executed.
Hmm.
Because we got our first taste of Matt Murdock in No Way Home, and it was brief and it was fine and it was cute. But
Hmm.
this was our first taste of Daredevil in the
Right.
MCU.
Hmm.
And I thought they did a wonderful job. I
Hmm.
really did. And I don't know. I just like I just had like this wave of excitement wash over me.
Oh yeah.
I love the suit. I thought that the suit looked great. I don't think we'll ever see it again. Um, I love that they did the little play of the music when he was
Yes.
talking. I love that he got a little bit cocky when he was talking to Jen, and she was like, "Why are you dressed like this?" And he was like, "I'm Daredevil." Like, he's
It's
just
like,
really good
yeah.
like that.
And
Yeah,
she's like,
no,
yeah, it is daring that you just how to use ketchup and
use
mustard.
ketchup and mustard. Yeah, no, I thought that it was great. I loved the walk of shame. I
Yes.
loved that. I love that he showed up late to court and he was like, "I'm here." Like
Yeah.
it felt like he was addressing like everyone who had been asking for him to show up. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it was great. I knew when he was showing up late that he was in good hands.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
And
I was like, these people did their homework.
oh yeah. Well, and they had a lot of fun. And what I liked about Daredevil in this series, and this is something that a lot of diehard Netflix series guys were really adamant and upset with, is it it leans into a different kind of character style from Matt Murdock that we haven't seen, right? Like Netflix is
Hmm.
definitely more of a gritty, darker series that we all love.
Hmm.
But it's not the only version, just like the comics, it's not the only version of Matt Murdock and Daredevil that we can have and
Yeah,
experience and have fun with, And so I really liked how they had a lot of fun with this in a number of different ways. There's a lot of call outs to the Netflix show, like the music
yeah,
that you mentioned and the hallway scene. We all thought we were going to get another,
yeah,
long one shot sequence and everything. And then that got interrupted by Jennifer Walters. And I love that part as well, too.
yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. In terms of the suit, I will say, and you probably see me talk about this on TikTok as well too, is that I am not a fan of the yellow suit at all. Like I know that was his very first suit when he was first introduced into Marvel
Hmm.
Comics, and I just never been a fan. But with that being said, I feel like they did a good job of making it seem realistic and palpable. With it wasn't like a bright yellow, it was more like a metallic gold type of thing. Not even metallic gold because it was more opaque than
Yeah,
shiny or anything, but at least it was something that's like tasteful and like I could get behind that. Like as somebody who is adamantly anti yellow and red Daredevil,
yeah,
I like this suit. I thought the suit really, pulled off well and they had a lot of fun with it. And it was a lot of just kind of a what they call it, a fan
like fan service kind of.
fan service. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah,
that's the word I'm looking for. A
yeah,
lot of fan service with this, which I think
yeah.
is a lot of fun, and they had great opportunities with that. And I, it's unfortunate that some people think that we can't enjoy this Daredevil because they thought it was like too campy or too unrealistic with his somersault moves, even though that's what we got from the comics. And again, it's one of those things where they were probably already looking for things to break down and hate
Hmm.
about the show and all that. The whole thing about how people think that Matt Murdock was made to look like a bit of a man slut or whatever, right? And, and the fact that it's like in the comics, he slept around. Like, yes, he was
Even
Catholic,
in
but he wasn't a good
Netflix.
Catholic. Yeah,
At,
in
at,
Netflix. Yeah.
at the end, I think, of the very first episode, he shows up in Foggy's like, were you out with somebody last night? Or like with the barista from the coffee shop or something like that. Like even in the Netflix show, he was getting around.
Yeah. Oh
Look
yeah.
at his backlog. He had Electra, Karen,
Mhm.
Claire. Who else? He had
I,
women.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and in the show, I don't know if he actually ever did sleep with Karen, but he got close to it. Like there was an intense scene, but I don't think they actually
Yeah,
did. Yeah.
yeah,
But there's a lot of like suggestive scenes, and like I think at one point, like because he was blind, like she undressed in front of him or something like that, So
yeah.
a lot of suggestive stuff that if he was a devout Catholic, he wouldn't have put himself in that situation to begin with. And so it's funny how they got upset with that, but it was still okay with how Netflix portrayed him and everything.
Well, it's
So
because they couldn't relate to him, I guess. But that's
just a little bit, right? Yeah.
that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But no, I thought that was great. And
Oh,
I laughed so hard. We actually stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning to watch episode 8 because we knew he was going to be on there.
oh yeah.
And so, or I might have had my husband wake me up. I think he's a night owl, so he like tapped me on my shoulder and he was like, "Daredevil's on," and I was like, "Okay." You know?
Right.
So, but yeah, the scene where he's walking through the grass and he just says hi to that lady, I'm
Yes.
cracking up.
Yeah.
And you know what I noticed? Someone pointed this out on TikTok, and I didn't even like pay attention to this, but he's walking barefoot on grass. Like he's literally
Oh my
touching
God.
grass.
That's even better.
I know. I was like,
Oh
oh,
man.
that's good. I don't know if they did it on purpose or not, but yeah, Charlie Cox.
Somebody did. Like somebody must be like, hey, why don't we have a walk on grass? Didn't even explain it to the people, but like just have them walk on grass for the shot and like let's see, let's keep it in and see what happens with it. But they knew what they were doing, right?
They absolutely knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
No, it was fantastic. So
yeah. But yeah, I love that whole bit with Matt Murdock and Daredevil. And honestly, I hope we get a lot more of those two in the MCU, whether Jennifer Walters shows up on the Daredevil series or some other future project. But I absolutely love their chemistry on screen as those two characters. And it's just great. Like I never would have had thought or pictured them together, but seeing them in the show, I absolutely loved it. And I hope they do more of that somehow.
yeah, I think that they had great chemistry, like you said, and you could just tell, gosh, you could just tell that Charlie Cox was just happy to be there.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
it just made my heart happy. But yeah, I'm sure that they'll team up, especially like as lawyers at the very least at some point. So I'm like you. I'm interested to see them moving forward.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the finale episode, episode 9. I forget what was the title of it. So I apologize for that. But I want to get your thoughts about this being a finale episode, especially with it being so different, not just from other series, but in my opinion, I think it was very daring. I know that's probably a pun with Daredevil and all that, but I think they did risk a little bit in how they wrote the finale episode here. And I personally enjoyed it. I don't know how it hit with the rest of the audience and everything like that, but I enjoyed it just because, again, it's not a serious show. So I felt like, with it not being a serious show, they could do this and have a lot of fun with it. But I want to get your thoughts about what the finale episode was like for you.
I went into it expecting what I think we all thought was going to happen, like a big giant fight at the end. Like I really went into it thinking like, okay, like she's going to fight so-and-so and like the leader's going to show it, like all the stuff that we had been predicting was going to happen.
Right.
And so when it like shut down into the Disney Plus menu, I was like, what? And I like looked at Nathan, my husband, and he looked at me and he was like, and she like she came busting out of it, and I was like, oh my God. So yeah, like that, I was pleasantly surprised with the finale. I really, really was. I love that the whole time, we're kind of being told throughout the series that the villain of the show is like the toxic male fans. Because let's be real, I mean, they announced the show in like 2019, so they've been reading they've been reading the comments. Like they've had plenty of time to prepare for this. And I love that the whole time we were kind of led to believe that they were the real villains of the show, and we get Todd injecting himself with the blood and everything, and then she's just like, now, like, you're not gonna see this and relate to it and be like, yeah, like I'm the villain. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just rip the rug out from under them. I loved it. I thought it was great. Like having her come out of the Marvel formula to discuss the problems of the Marvel formula. Like my mouth was on the floor. So
right.
I thought it was great. I loved it.
Yeah,
loved it.
The Disney Plus screen. I'll be honest, when my wife and I were watching it, we literally thought something happened to our TV, because that has actually happened to us before. Like we'll be watching a show, then all of a sudden it just cuts out to the menu screen.
That's weird.
Like, so we legitimately thought something had happened, and like I was getting ready
to
like,
damn it.
Yes. And then my wife's like, wait, is Jennifer still talking? And we're listening. We're like, what? And then we saw her punch out through that.
Yeah.
And I just remember losing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Because it reminds me of Andy Kaufman from the 70s, where he would do that little, I don't know if you're familiar with Andy Kaufman and what he's done.
So, I don't think so.
So he's in like Taxi, and there was a biopic done about him with Jim Carrey that played him called Man on the Moon. And he was just a really popular guy back in the 70s and 80s. And what he did was he did comedy, but it was just so different that it just really, was odd with people. And he just did like practical jokes that only he and like a couple of people really understood. And so at the time, people didn't know like what was going on until he explained it like way after the fact. And one of the things that he did is he had a show, and he told the production team to make it look like for like 5 seconds that it was like frozen or whatever, so that people would actually get out of their seat, hit the TV, and try to fix it.
Yeah.
And so
that was great.
And that was a scene in Man on the Moon. And so when that happened, I knew what it felt like back in the 70s when Andy Kaufman did that to people, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like we got kicked out of the menu again, but they had planned that whole thing. Yeah. It was
great.
Yeah. So it was hysterical, but like and I think it was a really creative way to address how people have talked about, and I will say I've criticized MCU shows for this as well too, but how everything just kind of gets dropped in the finale in terms of like everything just kind of gets rushed and all that, and just kind of had to resolve really quickly. And so I think that's what's kind of what happened here, is that they intentionally wrote it that way so they can kind of address that part of what people had talked about, because that's exactly what it looked like was happening. It's like all this thing was happening. Bruce came out of nowhere, and everything else. And Titania like shows up, like literally like Jennifer Walters like looking around like, what the hell is going on here?
But that's what happens like at the end of an Avengers movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people just show up.
Right.
But and that to me, like we were talking about comic accuracy earlier, like that was just page for page out of a John Byrne, the Sensational SheHulk run. And I think Bumpkins made a video about this as well, but like, and he showed like the page, she's like literally ripping through the paper, and it's like white for a couple pages, and she's like yelling at John Byrne. She's like, Byrne, what is going on? And she's like, I want to be in my apartment, and I want my boyfriend there, and I want this and I want that. And like you cut to the next page, and like she's just standing in her apartment like like so satisfied. And I'm like, she did that. She pulled a Sensational SheHulk. Like she was like, I'm talking to Kevin, and this isn't happening. I want my ending. And it was beautiful. Beautiful to watch for sure.
But and I love how they address Kevin, because you and I had a conversation about this, how it kind of got ruined for me because I watch with the captions on because I have hearing loss.
I do
and
too,
when they and when they keep referring to Kevin, it was an acronym. It wasn't a proper name. And so automatically I'm like, okay, obviously this is not going to be Kevin Feige. Something else is going to happen.
Yeah.
But then when you saw what it was, it's just genius. Like just how much fun they had.
Yeah.
With just like, because they got to be meta and just say like, what's been going on with like what people have been saying about the MCU, and like, let's just make it part of it of the MCU. And Kevin being like this robot that, does all these algorithms to figure out like, what's the highest success rate. I want to know how Feige felt about that.
I think his only complaint was about the hat, right? I'm pretty sure that was the one thing he was like, "Why did you do that?" And they were like, "Evan, you wear a hat
You wear
every
a hat.
day."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like no one has seen him without a hat since he started the MCU, you know? So it's
literally.
yeah.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, but
I thought it was so good.
yeah. So I like the finale. I know some people, you know, again, felt like things just kind of got resolved. Like you didn't see, you know, why things actually happened after she talked to Kevin. But again, I think for the nature of the show, I think they did a great job of wrapping things up. I loved how she said, how she, you know, talked about like smashing Matt Murdock and they brought him in again and all that. Like I absolutely love that. And all those aspects. So I think as a finale episode, I think it really lived up to being authentic to the character, both in the show and the comics. And I absolutely love that. Like, is it a great finale episode as a series that would have been like, you know, like a Hawkeye series or Moon Knight? Like, you know, obviously not, but because there's a SheHulk show, it was a perfect finale episode for a SheHulk episode or for a series. So
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think it kind of keeps that door cracked open for her to kind of have some more engagements with other people, and like you just never really know where she's going to show up, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, I think they did a good job of handling it, like you said, comic and character accurate. Yeah.
Right. Definitely. All right, so last thing, and then we'll get into some listeners' thoughts about the show as well too. But the future of the MCU now that we've had She-Hulk, what do you think this might, you know, mean for the MCU moving forward? I know a lot of people are still asking, you know, is this the same Daredevil as the one in the Netflix series? We did get a mid-credit scene with Abomination, you know, going out there again, and you know, there's speculation about that being, you know, him being part of Thunderbolts. We got the introduction of Scar, and I said Scar. That's not right.
Yeah, that's right.
Is this Scar?
Yeah.
Hulk's son? Is that? I'm sorry. When I said Scar, I immediately thought of Lion King, and so I'm just like, that doesn't sound right.
No, yeah, it's just spelled like a jumbled up. It's like
SKAAR.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So we have that. So there's been talk about there going to be a World War Hulk, you know, series or movie or whatnot. But I want to hear from you, you know, as you watch the series and looking to the future of the MCU with She-Hulk and what we've seen in it so far. What are you excited about? What are you speculating? Anything, any thoughts that you have about it?
I'm excited to see. I don't know. Like we said earlier, I'm pretty fresh to all this. So like I'm not jaded like some of these other fans who've been watching like everything since 2008, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm excited for anything no matter what. But I do think that we're going to get some more just like kind of rando cameos here and there, whether they're movies or shows or whatever. Like I just think that it just is just going to make more sense. I'm hoping that the finale kind of basically admitted to us, like, hey, we're going to try not to follow this formula anymore. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we don't have to end everything the way that we've always ended it. So I'd like to see a little bit of change in how they write and direct movies. Yeah, I'd like to see her just kind of show up and, you know, represent whoever needs to be represented, and Matt too, you know. So I think more cameos is probably what I'd be most excited to kind of see in the future.
For me, so obviously, you know, Daredevil's already been confirmed. Talked about, I want to see more of Jennifer Walters and Matt Murdock together. I will say one things I did love about the finale episode that I'm hoping, again, like we know it's going to happen, but I'm hoping that this was kind of like a nod of like, yes, we know this is, you know, what you're asking, all that. But when Jennifer Walters just asked, you know, flat out, when are we going to get an X-Men project, you know?
Yeah.
God,
it was good. Well, and you know, she might obviously not when we first get a Fantastic Four movie, but she's been a member of the Fantastic Four. So you never know. You just never know how that's going to play out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, so I think for me it's going to be those, you know, two things. I think it'd be a lot of fun to see her in different projects. I'm curious to see if she does show up in something that is not a She-Hulk property proper, if she still does the fourth wall break, or how they're going to handle that, because we haven't really seen a fourth wall breaking character in a project that's not theirs. And so if she does show up in Fantastic Four, like you mentioned, because he was a member of that team at one point, or something other than like Deadpool, where, you know, Deadpool's always breaking the fourth wall and all that. I'm curious to see how they handled that, because I think it would be a really interesting test to see how audiences respond to a movie that is not a She-Hulk movie, but She-Hulk still interacts with the audience in that regard as well too. So it's just more of like an interest of like, if they do that, you know, how will that pan out with the, you know, movie, and how audiences will react to that as well too. So
Yeah. No, I think it'd be kind of funny, like if she was in, like, for example, a Fantastic Four movie, and like she's,
yeah.
you know, watching this very serious interaction go down with like Reed and Sue, and then she just like looks at the audience and says something. Reed's like, "What are you doing?"
Exactly. Yeah.
Back here, back here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that'd be a lot of fun. Yeah. So I think it'd
Yeah.
be a lot of fun, especially if people know, you know, that's what She-Hulk does and all that, which I
Mhm.
mean, you know, I think by the time people see that, they'll know that, you know, and I don't think it'll be jarring, you know, in the least. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
All right, so let's take a look at some of our listeners' thoughts about the series, and I'm just going to read through these here real quick. We can, you know, chime in or whatnot, but I want to make sure I read them and give everybody their chance to kind of be heard and share what they thought about it. But from our Instagram account, the username Fant0MAS said, "I loved it, light and fun, but also meta and deep, and Daredevil," which I think everybody's loving that. Our friend John's Comics with said, "Solid show, 8 out of 10. Final 2 episodes redeemed the mediocre early ones," which I think we kind of talked about. There's a couple episodes that, you know, were probably not as great as the other ones, but it was still a lot of fun. So, and then our other friend, Naz Mansour, said, "Lighthearted comedy show, won't ask for more than what was delivered. It was very fun." On TikTok, Supnep Loves Comics said, "Personally, I thought it was good. The comedic elements were great, and the world building with the lesser known comic characters was amazing. I do think it suffered in the middle part of the season where some of the episodes felt like filler. I would love to see more court scenes and more Daredevil. Hopefully they do more crossovers like this one." I think that's, you know, kind of the common theme that we're seeing here, is that the middle episodes are probably not as great, but we're all loving Daredevil.
Mhm.
Mr. Marvel 613 said, "Fun ending, but the problem I had was the overall direction. The plot and purpose of the show was hard to follow. He wanted to learn more about Jim before Hulk. It was hard for me to sympathize with the burden of being a She-Hulk without knowing much of her before the show. Daredevil and the ending was fun, but honestly just missed the mark for me a little bit." So, and I think that's fair criticism. I think, you know, again, not every show is going to be for everybody, and
Mhm.
you know, and I think that's a fair criticism. For some people, it's going to be okay, or, you know, they might overlook that. For other people, it might be problemsome, and I think those are fair with that.
Yeah.
Um, Captain Cody said, "I liked it. I really felt like it going true to her comics, and I felt like they captured her character well. The comedy was great as well. I love introducing the lesser known characters and mainly just building a world away from what we know." And then 2 comments from our Discord server, which we actually just launched a while back with a couple other content creators as well too. The Discord is called the Lunacasters, and so I'd ask our Discord server what they thought about the show. And ODPH Ken, who is the one of the hosts of the podcast called ODPH, which I think is Ocho Duo Parlay Hour. He said is a perfect send off to fans of John Bryan's run, which you had mentioned, and gave the MCU a shot of creativity with a spectacular performance by Tatiana Maslany. And JT from Beyond the Fandoms podcast said, "More Titania. Love the fourth wall break. The case by case episodes might have been up and down, but the overall theme of balancing who you want to be and who others want you to be is pretty deep in his opinion. Kevin needs to be a reoccurring thing. Fingers crossed She-Hulk is in at least a few episodes of Daredevil." So yeah, so I loved hearing people's thoughts. Thank you all for sharing that. Maggie, was there anything that any of our listeners said that you thought was interesting or that you wanted to discuss or point out before we wrap up this episode?
I think that they're all like pretty valid, and I can agree with the majority of them. I think that the people who um don't really understand what the plot was, I
Hmm.
feel like you just kind of have to, like, it being just a comedy, episodic, you know, sitcom style show, there are going to be filler episodes, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
even within those filler episodes, we're getting some of that plot, which is Jennifer learning how to be herself and how to be a Hulk. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So even if she's just getting drunk at a wedding and it just doesn't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
It's still us kind of following her daily life of trying to figure out who she is in this new role that she's been that she just didn't ask for, to be honest with you. She didn't ask to be a Hulk.
Right.
So yeah, I think that if you kind of take yourself out of, you're still kind of in that formula, that Marvel formula, where you're trying to figure out what each episode means. You know what I mean? So when you kind of take a step back and look at it through a different lens of just like, oh, I'm just watching New Girl or Friends or whatever, like not everything has to mean something. It's just us learning her as she's learning herself.
Right.
So that's what I took away from it, though.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And again, some people want to have some of those details to be able to do that. And, I think this is one of those things where, you're not going to be able to write for the general audience. I think that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
There's good shows that'll do that and good projects that'll do that. But again, I think, one of those things is trying to find out every single possible detail I think is hard to do and cram into a story without it being forced. And so I think sometimes, just like the comics, we might have to fill in the details a little bit until we find out new information as well, too. So who knows? I mean, maybe we'll get kind of a flashback to Jennifer Walters at some point, but pre-Hulk, to kind of fill in some of those things as well, too. But I think even if we don't get that, we still get the idea in the sense, and that we can still, be able to make those connections as well. So.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd be curious to see if Kevin does show up in the MCU again.
I don't know.
Outside of like She-Hulk or Deadpool or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe Deadpool. Maybe Deadpool will take a trip, but
yeah.
I don't know.
I can see that happening. I can see Deadpool going in and just like taking his katanas and like slicing it all up and be like, we're done. And that's how he kills the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right?
Yeah, I love it. I love that we're kind of moving away from like a multiverse, and now it's just like, we got to find Kevin.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, Maggie, thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts about She-Hulk. Before I let you go, where can we find you and anything that you want to share with us online, either social media or maybe your, anything that you want to share with us? How can we, connect with you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I will take any opportunity I can to talk about She-Hulk and Daredevil. But you can find me. I am on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, all VeganSuperKick. So I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. I'll send you my link.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'll make sure to put those in the episode notes as well. So Thanks again for coming on, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up another episode of The Captioned Life. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can follow us on social media at Captioned Life. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionedlife.com.